guys, so today I'm teaching you how to edit aesthetic thumbnails, and in particular I'm teaching you how to edit thumbnails like Lynn. So Lynn has a YouTube channel with over 600,000 subscribers, and she has a lot of videos up with super cool and inspirational, I would say, thumbnails. So if you're looking for some ideas on how to make your thumbnails look better, I would definitely look at her channel and try to recreate some of them even as practice. So today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to basically do like her handwriting effect and her color palette and stuff like that. So without further ado, let's get started with this tutorial. So the first thing you're going to want to do is load a plain background into Picsart. This is an app that I use in order to edit thumbnails, and it's what we'll be using today. So I just added an image that was 1350 by 760 pixels, and then I went ahead and added 3 photos for the background. In Lynn's photo in particular, she has this photo of her posing in front of buildings, she has a photo of the Washington Monument, and then she has a screenshot of her basically just working on her computer. So I went ahead and I added those. I think 3 is a good number because it just gives a lot of information to your thumbnail without overcrowding it. Then what I'm doing is I'm starting by cropping all my images and just making sure that they look how I want them to look. So for instance, the Washington Monument here looked a little weird. So I went ahead and cropped it using the crop tool in the bottom bar. And then what I did is I resized this image of Lynn standing in front of these buildings so that I had the crop right. So the way she edited this is that her arms and her leg almost stick out onto the photo of the Washington Monument. So the way you're going to want to edit this is just crop the image how you normally would, so it just goes in the background. And then what you're going to want to do is go to this tool at the top and hit duplicate, and there's actually a feature called the cutout feature that you click on person, and it will cut out the image of like the person for you. And what we're going to do with this is how we're going to get her arm to stick up from the Washington Monument. We're just going to use the move up tool on that pic of the Washington Monument, and you see it gives you that overlay effect. Now what I'm doing is I'm just going ahead and skewing it, and what that does is it rotates it so the Washington Monument looks straight, and then I just keep playing around with that until I have it how I like it, which kind of took me a while. So once I had it how I liked it, I went ahead and I took the erase tool on this image of Lynn standing there, and I just erased all the raw edges because the cutout tool isn't perfect, so sometimes there are some weird little like lines and stuff, so I went ahead and got rid of that so it looked clean. A way to also do this is if the lines are jagged, you could do an outline later on. Okay, and then once I had those 2 images set, I wanted to crop this image of Lynn studying and get it how I wanted it to look for the thumbnail. So I just cropped it to whatever size I wanted it, and then I realized that for this thumbnail she actually has like 2 sections. So she has the top part, and then she has like a green bar at the bottom where she adds the text. So what I did here is I just resized everything so that it fit, and you see it's basically the same thing I did before, but just making it smaller and leaving this bar at the bottom, and this is where we're going to add the text, so make sure you include that. This also allowed me to add like a better picture and add more pictures to the background, so it's a good tip if you want to include like a lot of images in your thumbnail but you don't have the space necessarily for it. So anyway, here I'm just arranging it, resizing it, and playing around with all the different images and the crops of the images until I have it how I like it. So the next step is to add handwritten text, which you can do in Picsart, but I think that Procreate is best for this. It does cost $5 though, so you can do the similar thing in Picsart. But basically what I'm doing is I'm adding my photo, and then I'm going ahead and making a new layer. Then what I'm doing is finding a color I want for the background, and I'm just going ahead and matching it to the tones in the background. You can even use the eyedropper tool by holding down on a certain color to use that color for the background. Then I'm changing my brush style by clicking on the paintbrush and changing it to this streak one, and then I'm just going back and forth and just making the background of the title that I want, and it's just this large rectangle with these kind of like wispy looking ends to it, because that's how Lynn's thumbnail looks. And then the best option for just working on Picsart is to just create a new layer every time you create something new. So what I'm doing here is I made a new layer for the text, and I'm just going ahead and copying the text that she wrote. Obviously, if you're making a different title, you're going to need to write different text, but a way to go about this is to find like a handwriting text online and then typing out what you want in that handwriting text, and then not tracing it but trying to replicate it, and it can give you a really cool effect for your text. But anyway, here I'm just really playing around with it and trying to make it look perfect. One trick actually is when you're trying to draw straight lines, if you draw a line and then hold it down at the end while you're still drawing it, you'll be able to make the line stay straight like I'm doing here with the letter D. And then you see my A here gets a little wonky, but you can always go back and fix that because we created a layer so we can just erase the letter and not the background that goes along with it. This straight line effect also works for like circles and other shapes. So if you draw like an O and you want it to be perfectly circular, you just have to hold down. Okay, and then I ran out of space, but I will show you guys how to fix that. So if you run out of space, just draw the text you want on another part of the image. Like I'm just drawing college in this random part that doesn't really work. And so once you have all your text, what you're gonna wanna go ahead and do is use this tool to move it and resize it. So if you go to the modify tool up in the left corner, you'll see this S-looking shape, and you can actually just select a certain part of your image. So as you can see here, I'm moving it over so that I can actually write the E, and the reason I'm writing it all like large and all over the thumbnail is so that the size of the stroke is the same. But anyway, what I'm then doing is I'm just resizing this text that says first day of by selecting it and then clicking the arrow, and you can use 2 fingers to make it bigger, or you can drag the edges, and then you can also rotate it with the green circle tool. Then I'm doing the same thing for the college text. I'm just resizing it and making it a little more narrow and then rotating it a little bit. And I just keep playing around with my text until I end up liking it by using these tools. And it's a good way to be able to just not have to redo your thumbnail or your text 100 times. Then what I'm doing is I'm changing the size of my paintbrush and then going in and just fixing any mistakes and also erasing anything, because you guys can see there are these like little extra bits of handwriting and stuff that I don't want there. And then I'm going back and erasing this A, and as you guys can see, it's only erasing the A and not the background because we were using the layer option. So now that I have my text how I want to add a shadow to it. So first I'm just adjusting it so that I can make sure that I can add the shadow to the background. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to these 2 squares in the top right corner of the screen, and I'm dragging that layer to the left and clicking duplicate, and that will just duplicate the same layer so I don't have to redraw the text. Then what I'm doing is I'm going to the move tool and I'm moving the second layer slightly to the left. We can edit this later, but this is just so that we can see what color the shadow is that we're making. So I'm going back to that layer, and now I'm clicking on the magic wand, and you're not going to want to go to the HSB first. What you're going to want to do is go to, I believe it's color balance, and just play around with it until you get any color, because the goal here is just to get a color because we can change the hue later on. I just changed it from white to this cyan or blue color. And then what I did is I went to the HSB option, which is hue, saturation, and brightness, and I just played around with the brightness and the saturation until I got the color that I wanted. Lynn had like this light blue color, so I tried to replicate it by dragging the hue to blue, changing the saturation so it wasn't super bright, and then changing the brightness as well so that it was a little bit darker. And then I went back to that move tool and I just moved my text around until I had it how I liked it, and I liked the shadow. So the next thing Lynn adds to her thumbnails is a little bit of like extra text in order to make them more interesting. So I'm just going ahead and getting some white text and then going to the paint stroke option and writing it. So it's going to take a little bit of trial and error to make sure that it looks right, because the first time I did this, it looked like too big almost, or the strokes were too thick so that you couldn't really read it. So instead what I did is I just went ahead and I erased it and then just changed the size of the brush so that when I wrote the city, which is what she wrote, it just looked better. I also adjusted the text so that it was over to the left so that it was more legible, because it was hard to read over top of the blue. I also added an arrow, and then Lynn also says online, or writes online on her thumbnail, so I went ahead and did that too. I also used that feature I was talking about before, where you hold down on the text, and it just made it look a lot cleaner. If you have bad handwriting, I really suggest using this because it makes your like writing look a lot better. So I just added that and added these stars next to it since that's what she added. Another thing Lynn did was she added these little doodles in front of the Washington Monument. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to this color tool, and I'm actually holding the eyedropper over the background we made before because I decided that that color would complement it. I just changed the brush size and then drew like little lines sticking out from the Washington Monument. And then pretty much this was the final thumbnail.